the funniest one to me too was we got a tour around Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And our tour guide, she wasn't from the Netherlands. I think she actually was from the UK. But her partner was Dutch, and she's a little bit heavier set, and she said she told the story because and this was before we went to the marketplace. We hadn't really had an experience with that Dutch sort of bluntness, and so she was talking about like her. They wanted to go out one night, and she like tried this dress on, and the classic like, "Hey, do I look fat?" And then he just looked at her and went, "Yes." he just goes, "I love you, but yes." I was like, "Oh my god!"
It's like, this is new.
I have never encountered this before.
Culture clash.
Yeah,
and that was like our first day in the Netherlands. So we were like, oh, this is going to be an interesting
one. Yeah, this will be an interesting trip here.
Have you ever been to the Netherlands?
No, I do actually. I've driven through there without stopping on the way to. I think it was on my way to Germany, but I've never actually stopped and been to Amsterdam. But I've been to like Belgium next door, which doesn't count. But that was the closest I've been, I guess, where I spent any quality time. So.
That's actually funny. It's the opposite of us. We actually drove through Belgium.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And then, but stopped in the Netherlands.
Belgium is just one big traffic jam most of the time.
Oh, really?
I mean, it's a beautiful country, but there's a lot of highways from other European countries that run through. So
everybody just skips Belgium on their way somewhere else.
The only reason I wanted to stop there. Have you ever seen the movie In Bruges? With Colin Farrell.
Yes, yeah.
That's I wanted to stop in Bruges, but
Bruges is beautiful.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah. It's really incredible, but it's one of those things where it's one of those European places that is like really old, really beautiful, but so full of kind of tourists and tourist groups and everything like that. It's like, you go to Paris and it's full of tourists, and it's one of those places. And I kind of, it's finding those hidden places where you don't have like all the bus tours. Those are usually the best places, I think. But you do find that like when you go, those European places as well really struggle with all those people because they were like designed for like people walking or on a horse, and then you've got like all these coach parties arriving and it's like all jammed together. So
isn't it always like funny how as a tourist you always complain about other tourists?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know. You're like, oh my god, there's so many other tourists here.
Well, I think you're literally a part of the problem.
Exactly.
It's like you're there trying to see the Eiffel Tower just like everybody else, but you're like, but I'm going to pick a different angle because I'm not them.
Exactly. We did I remember so we had 2 kids at the time and my wife was pregnant with our third, and we drove from the UK to Austria. But we'd stop in different places. Like we'd stopped in we drove through Switzerland, and we did like a proper road trip and everything like that. But I always found that like because we did go through all these small towns and everything as well. I always found that was fun because you always felt like you were going places where it was just just normal life, and it wasn't like curated to tourists. I always like those experiences because you're just kind of going, they're just being themselves in their own country and not like trying to like sell a tour or anything like that. And those bits are fun, but then also at the same time, there's some things you just have to see that are touristy. Like I did the CN Tower with my kids. I was like, I can't go to Toronto and not do the CN Tower.
I think at least once.
Like, yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Enough, we went to Toronto in July and like been there before. Ben was born there.
Yeah. So,
but we still want to go see the CN Tower. It's like it's been a while. It's like if we're here and it's been like a few years, it's like we probably should go back just to see what it's like, re-experience the city again. Do you have you traveled a lot throughout your life?
I think mainly I did a lot in Europe because it was it's cheap to get around. Once you're in Europe, it's cheap to go anywhere in Europe pretty much. So like lots of like Western Europe. When I was like 8. So I was 8 in 1992. There was it wasn't long after the Iron Curtain had come down, and I went on an exchange trip as a scout, like a Cub Scout, lived in like a wooden shack in the forest with some other scouts in it's Czechia now, but it was just still Czechoslovakia or Czech Republic at the time, so we had to go through Germany through the border crossing. And that was really interesting. It was like a post-Cold War cultural exchange, and they came over to us as well. That was kind of a really interesting to go there at that time as well. Was like really interesting because it was obviously still a very different place because they'd been like part of the Warsaw Pact for God knows how long. So, and then me and my wife, when we were in our mid-20s, we'd been saving money up to buy a house or a deposit for a house, and we decided that we weren't ready. We're like, I'm not ready to be a grown-up, and we just did like a month-long road trip across the western US.
Second best option.
Yeah, exactly. So we kind of we had a good time. We flew to San Francisco, and then we drove down, and we did like the length of California down from San Francisco, and we drove out into the desert and Grand Canyon and Arizona and Utah and all these cool places. So that was fun. And then for our wedding, we got married in Banff, and then
that's cool.
We road tripped to Vancouver, and then I'm not a cruise person, but it is the only way you could really see all these places. But we did a cruise up into the Inside Passage in Alaska, and that was amazing.
That's actually funny. On our last podcast, we had a guy who's a wedding photographer.
Oh, really?
He's from the UK.
Yeah.
And for one of his jobs when he was younger, he was working on a cruise that also went, I think, to the exact same.
Oh, really?
Same route.
Really?
He mentioned Antarctica at least. So.
Well,
Antarctica, not Alaska.
Oh, yes. Never mind.
That's the other way.
It's cold.
I was like, why are you guys looking at
But it was funny when we got on the ship. The immigration person was like, "Do you just get married?" I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Because everyone on this ship is either newlyweds or nearly deads." But it was amazing. Like, I'm not a cruise person. I don't like the kind of, I don't know, I found that people were quite rude to the staff, but also like the staff were all like, I think they were all from like Indonesia. So you had like Indonesian staff and then like just white tourists being rude to them. And it was like a really visually, it was just, I found that upsetting.
Yeah, it's not a good vibe. Like.
No, it's not. But we had an amazing time, and like to see all those little small towns in Alaska. I don't know how we would have done it without being on the boat and everything like that. So it was incredible. So I've been quite lucky with that, and then like with work, again Europe and places too. But and then one of the weirdest experiences I had was we were filming Rod Gilbert's work experience. We'd filmed with the Army, we'd filmed with the Air Force, where they'd actually let